And then at the end of the week-long craziness was crowned the world's best bartender for 2017, and that completely put my life upside down. And you don't know what you're talking about. Why would I listen to a girl? Like,
I actually think that social media has had a positive influence on hospitality and on restaurants.
Okay, I love being creative and I love making drinks, so to be able to put the two together was something new for me. Being behind a bar for 20 years, you kind of, you have to have a good relationship with alcohol or it's not sustainable for your well-being. And
you could be, I don't know, you could be the Quentin Tarantino of cocktails. Nobody gives a shit if you're an What's up, guys? Welcome back to another hard-hitting episode of Behind the Stick. I am your host, or I am your co-host, Leandro Demon Riva, with my other intrepid co-host, Louis Fernandez.
Me.
I was
my
trying
name
to get
is
him
Louis
to say his own name. He didn't get the prompt. That's okay. Today we are going to be talking to the likeablest of all likable cocktails on the internet, Kaitlyn Stewart. She is a world-class winner. She is a world-class bartender. She is a world-class content creator, and I am so stoked to talk to her. What do you got to add, Louis?
Honestly, nothing, because that was probably one of the best intros that I've heard. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy this show. And
That's right.
how you guys doing? Sorry I was late. I apologize. I had a bit of an emergency that I had to deal with right before coming here. It's why I look like a homeless person.
never again, Louis.
but-
Never again.
Wait, you look like a homeless person? I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think
my
you look nice.
You look like a
thank
hipster.
you.
You look like
I
a
appreciate that.
West Coast hipster.
Hipster.
Well, I'll take that. It sounds
homeless.
better than,
that has been a meme.
Yep.
That sounds better than homeless person.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
so.
You're very
Yeah, I mean, I
Pacific
just-
Northwest right now.
I just, during the winter and when it's cold out here, I don't want to do my hair. I don't want to do things. Just wear a hoodie and a beanie and call it a day. What? We're going to drink some rum.
Why
So,
not?
Kaitlyn, how are you?
Good, man.
No, it is
11
2
Yeah.
p.m. for me.
Yeah, it's 2
you're
p.m.
good,
for
yeah,
you.
2 p.m.
I'm drinking yerba, so don't worry. I got you on the yerba drink.
Nice. I'm actually so happy, by the way, that you brought that up. I'm so happy that Guayaki sent you a care package, because I saw when you first posted it, I was like, dude, that's a good one.
I drink them way too often, but they the rep here in Vancouver literally hand delivered it to my door. Was
Oh,
like,
that's
hey,
awesome.
I'm outside with a package, and I was like, yeah, you best be outside with a package. I drink so much of it. I don't drink
that's
coffee, so
awesome.
it's my caffeine for, keeps me going. So I was
Yeah.
just trying to get over a bit of jet lag, so I'm like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, you
Nice.
seem like you
Well,
travel all the time. You seem like you're always on a plane.
Yeah.
Is that
I
all
love
because
it.
of
It's
world
great. Yes and no. It's a kind of a mix, but a lot of it has to do with doing stuff within different programs for world class around the world, which is great. And yeah, it's good, but it was, I traveled so heavily and then literally was at home for 2 years and I didn't travel at all. And so now getting back into the swing of traveling heavily again, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot what this was like. I'm older now, and I got really comfortable with my routine at home and staying home. But I love it. It's great. Yeah, it's.
Well, I think this is a nice segue into kind of really the first question that I got for you today, which is, you are a content creator, a mentor, a bar and brand consultant, and you were crowned World-Class Bartender of the Year in 2017. In case, I just want to give you your due so everyone knows, right?
Appreciate it.
And like Leandro said, you seems like you're always traveling. So what does a typical day even look like for you, if that's even a thing? Because obviously, if you're traveling all the time, how can you have a routine, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I like doing what I do, because there isn't really a standard typical day. I've never really been that type of person who likes to go into an office and sit at a computer, and I applaud people who can do that on 5 days a week. My partner does that, and I'm like, I don't know how you do it, and vice versa. They're like, I don't know how you do what you do. But typically, like get up, check my emails, and because I'm on the West Coast, I usually have like a backlog of emails that really need to get attended to, because they're either coming from like the UK or somewhere out east, and people are waiting for responses before they finish their day. So usually go through my email and check that, and then depending on if I'm working with a brand, I usually have deliverables. So I am spending a lot of time on my computer, writing and tweaking recipes, doing a ton of, like back and forth with glassware companies and distributors, and all of the stuff that nobody really talks about on the content creation side of things. But because I'm working with restaurants and bars and different brands, and it's interesting too, because if I'm working with a particular restaurant or a bar and I'm writing a cocktail menu for them, it can be vastly different between writing it for like a Vancouver-based place, a Toronto-based place, a New York-based place, a Shanghai place, because like the inventory that you get in is very different. So it's a lot of like research and dabbling and, spending some time on the computer looking around for stuff. And when I can and I have time, make some content in between there. It's funny because it's like as much as I love doing the content, I don't look at it as like my primary job. For me, it's all bonus, and it still is like crazy that I can call it that, and it's fun. So, but it does take up a lot of time, as you guys know. Putting videos together and editing, and especially when you start getting a following and people expect to see a certain amount of videos from you per week or per month, and you feel like you're letting people down when you don't have time to do it. You're like, I'm on a plane, I can't film, or whatever the case may be. But,
so do you post like? Do you usually post on a certain cadence? Like, do you have like a specific schedule that you like to stick to? Is it more random? How do you post? It really
depends. It really depends. I try to stay consistent, and I try to do like 5 a week. So I try to go like Monday through Friday.
Whoa, 5 a week?
Yeah, I try. Some weeks are better than others, but it's my goal to put one out like Monday through Friday. And again, timing wise, it's a struggle when you are in a different time zone completely. And I'm trying to like balance like, okay, I got, what time is it in Vancouver when I normally post versus like where I am right now. And especially too, when you get into a different like VPN, it's like, oh, that sound doesn't work in this country that you're in, but it will work over here, or vice versa. And so you kind of have to like do a bit of dabbling. But yeah, I mean, I tried to. This week I gave myself some grace because I just had gotten back from a trip, and I was like, I do not, even just to clean up my space, I'm like, I don't want to clean up my area to film right now.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll dive into that when I absolutely need to. But yeah, I try to get as many out there as possible. Stay consistent, at least.
Right.
It's tough though.
Like when we started this podcast today, we actually kind of jumped in as if everybody watching knows exactly who Kaitlyn is. I think it'd be helpful if we just like talk to you about like who you are, where you're from, how you got started in this business. Go.
Oh man, well, my name is Kaitlyn. I was born in Toronto, but raised mostly in Vancouver my whole life. I've been in this industry in some capacity for 20 years, I want to say. I started as like a hostess and a server when I was 18, and then, slowly worked my way into bartending. And, it's kind of like everybody's story. I started because it was a good way to make money to pay for university, and while working a couple of other jobs, and my family's been in hospitality my whole life, so it was kind of just a natural thing to, work in restaurants and in bars. And yeah, so I when I started going into like cocktail making, I was actually a sober bartender for like 4 years. And
oh, wow.
I really wanted to focus on like the history, because I could dive into like classic cocktails especially, and read a recipe and know if I followed that recipe to a T that the drink would turn out the way it was supposed to. And so I started getting a real appreciation for just the history and knowledge of cocktails in general. And then I met a bar mentor. Like, didn't even know bar mentors were a thing, but I met a bar mentor at a place that I was working at that was really heavily focused on cocktails, and he kind of showed me the way of like, this is where you can take this. You can do more than just put liquid in a glass and serve it to a guest. There's a whole other world to this. And he entered me into my first bartending competition. Didn't know they existed, and I was like, I don't know this world. He's like, you'll do it. You'll be fine. You'll be great. Like, you used to do like
as a sober bartender?
No, at this point I had gone back into drinking.
Okay.
But yeah, so he threw me into my first competition, and he's like, "You used to dance, you used to sing, you're used to performing. Like, this should be no problem for you." And I was like, "Okay, I love being creative and I love making drinks, so to be able to put the two together was something new for me." And from there, I was like, I just didn't know this world existed. I didn't know you could travel around and work with brands in this type of capacity. And I almost took a brand job and left the industry. As many bartenders do. They take that path of, I don't want to be behind a bar for the rest of my life. Maybe I'll work for a brand and hawk a product. So I was very, very close to doing that, as I'm sure you guys have probably found yourself in that situation before. And I stopped myself and I was like, there's a couple of things I want to accomplish before I completely leave the industry forever. And because that's kind of the trajectory. Once you take a brand job, you don't often get back behind the bar. And one of them was entering World Class. World Class for me was kind of like the pantheon of bartending competitions. It's like the top tier. If you want to put yourself up against other bartenders around the world, this is the one that you kind of enter into. And so I entered kind of just with the mindset of, let's see how far I can take this. And bit by bit, I was like, oh, made the next round, and then ended up going to Mexico City in 2017 and representing for all of Canada as the Canadian Bartender of the Year, and again went from 60 bartenders around the world to 10 to 4, and then at the end of the week-long craziness was crowned the world's best bartender for 2017, and that completely put my life upside down. And yeah, it was a wild ride from there, which is maybe partially why I'm here today talking to you guys.
Well, that's awesome. Like, I can't imagine the feeling of when they were like, "Oh no, you, Kaitlyn, are the winner." Were you nervous? Like, what was because what was the competition finals like? Because I know they whittle it down to like you said, the last 4, and then what's the breakdown of actual world class? 'Cause I think one thing that maybe anybody listening to this might be interested in is how. Because one of the things that Leandro and I want to do with the podcast is really show that this industry and this career doesn't just have to be, oh, all I do is go to my bar a couple of days a week, bartend, and that's it. There are avenues of making this into a career, and I think World Class is one of the very prominent and oh my gosh, competitions that someone can kind of pursue, and obviously it kind of had an impact, like you said, on your career. So what was it like, the actual competition?
Well, yeah, I mean, people always ask me oh, what was the cocktail that you won with? And I'm like, well, there was probably 60 from beginning to end. So it's not just one drink, which is very different from, most cocktail competitions. Because it's, the competition is run by Diageo Spirits, and it's a whole portfolio. So it's not just one single spirit that you're working with. You're working with everything from vodka to scotch to, everything in between. And I don't call it that's the reason why it's not called a mixology competition. It's a bartending competition. You've got a series of challenges that you're faced with, and that pertain to all facets of bartending, from hosting and hospitality to, blind box challenges to tastings, tasting a cocktail and trying to pick out what the spirits are, tasting a blend of scotches and trying to pick out what the blend is in the scotch. There's a whole different sections to it. So it encompasses everything that we do as bartenders day in and day out. So, I mean, when I got to the global finals, there was probably 7 challenges, I would say. There was 4 for all 60 countries. Like I said, a couple were black box, a couple were ones you could prepare for and, have a bit of a story and a spiel to go along with it. The second round was my favorite, and I just wanted to make it to the speed round, because for me, I'm the speed round is Friday night service. This is the true test of a bartender. You got to make 8 drinks in 6 minutes, and it's just go, 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 go. Reminds me of you got a whiteout of tickets.
When you're doing your speed round, though, are you being judged on the way you're putting out drinks? Is it mimicking okay, these are going to go out to customers, so you've got to make sure that your order, the way that you're building your order is correct?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, it definitely helps, because you got judges sitting in front of you that are you got Dale DeGroff, Bueno-san, freaking, you name it, the pantheon of people in our industry that you're can't believe I have to make a drink for these people under pressure. So yeah, I mean, if it sits in a glass for too long and you put your first drink up compared to your 8th drink up or your 6th drink up, and the first one's been sitting there on ice and it gets watered down. So it's like, again, that mental gymnastics of like, okay, how do I make this as realistic as possible? But the speed round for my year was really fun. Since we were in Mexico City, there was a portable bar that they wheeled up into the middle of a luchador Mexican wrestling ring. And so I was bartending a speed round in a Mexican wrestling ring with probably like 200 to 300 people like in the crowd holding up signs, wearing luchador masks, and like it was so much fun. I loved it. So yeah, I was really stoked to make it to that round. And then once I made that round, and I made it to the final 4. The final challenge that year was a challenge on all of kind of like wind, fire, water, and earth, I want to say. So like the 4 elements. And so we had to create cocktails. We had maybe less than 12 hours to do prep and come up with concepts and do this whole thing around making cocktails around the 4 elements. And you could kind of figure that out however you wanted to. You could make 4 individual cocktails. You could make 2 that incorporated all the elements. But yeah, it was a really fun round for me because I don't know, I think I thrive under pressure. So it was really fun to kind of like figure out with my like little Canadian team, like, okay, this is what we got. This is what we're doing. Let's put it all out there. You know, put your heart on the line. And it's this is the last 4 drinks you'll serve in this competition and until who's, you know, crowned the winner. So yeah, it's that I still play that round in my mind, having, you know, like Alex Cartana and Bueno-san and Dale and Tim Phillips and Jennifer Lachanette and, you know, like all these amazing people sitting in front of you, just like staring at you, like wanting you to succeed, but also like judging your every move. And you're like, all right, here's my drinks. Hope you enjoy them. Luckily they did.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that you had a team. So it wasn't just yourself. It was a Canadian team that was like representing all of Canada?
So yeah, I mean, I was individually going down, but luckily, like the Canadian program especially does this really well. They always send down like the previous winner before you. So I had Shade Mulvaney, who resides now in New York. He worked at the Dead Rabbit and Dante for years, and he's awesome. So he had won for Canada the year before, and so he came down with me as my like kind of my like liaison. So if I was like, yo, I need XYZ, he'd be like, I'm on it. Let me worry about that. I'll go and pick this up for you. I'll iron your shirt if you need me to.
Oh, that's
so
incredible.
It was really, yeah, it's nice. So you got like a little support system with you and you're trying to like come up with ideas and not freak out.
Yeah.
But yeah. So a little support team.
Yeah,
and so how would you
I have a friend named Adam that competed and got best of the U.S. and then went to global. But didn't win at global, and just remembering all of the regional challenges that he had to do was crazy. I was like,
I got to judge him.
I can never do this because I just don't have the time to do it. Like this, it's a lot. It is a lot. Yeah.
Adam's great. I got to judge him the year that he competed at globals, which is another great thing. So being a former global winner, I get to go back every year, every finals, and judge or participate in some capacity. So it's really fun to kind of be on the reverse side of things and, you know, watch people go through this, but also say like, hey, take a deep breath. I know exactly what you've gone through. I've been in your shoes. I've stood behind that bar. You know, at the end of the day, like we're making cocktails and making people feel welcomed. That's, as long as that's happening, you're doing good.
Right on.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
And so how did your life, do you think, like change directly as a result of winning world class?
Man, I mean, like I said, it kind of turned it upside down. I'm a female bartender from Canada. I would say that is not, you know, the top on a lot of people's priority lists when it comes to, you know, putting on events or, you know, having guest bartenders come out and do all that kind of stuff. So having that title of World Class Bartender of the Year behind me just kind of like bumped me up a bit to be like, hey, like let's do some stuff with Kaitlyn. Let's invite her out. Let's, have her do a masterclass. Let's do this, do that. So having that title, pardon me, behind me really just kind of like bumped me up the ranks and put me on this platform that I don't think I would ever reach having not done it. Right. Because I mean, as you guys know, like it's a tough market out there for bartenders, even for like people who create content online. It's there's a lot of people that do it. So if any little thing that helps you stand out, and also because it's such a recognized competition around the world, and because a lot of people know how much work and effort and how difficult it is, you gain a ton of respect from people that I look up to, who are now I consider my peers. Are like, you kind of write your own resume just by saying like, yeah, I won world class, or like, cool, done, boom, let's get you in here, let's do this, let's do that. And it's like, oh, awesome. Like, instead of being like, here's all the hard work that I put in all over these 20 years. it didn't just happen overnight, but this definitely helped.
So you win world class, you're doing all those things. What made you decide to start making content?
Man, for me, it was just another form of hospitality, another outlet. As as many people started, pandemic really, like, I would say, like, boosted why I was doing it. I couldn't have people sit at my bar. I couldn't talk to people, as I would on a regular, service night. And I would have a ton of my regulars just reach out to me over the course of like the pandemic in the first, like 6 to 8, 9 months, when everybody was kind of stuck at home, making sourdough, making cocktails, doing all that stuff, and reach out and be like, hey, like, we really miss sitting at the bar. How do you make your margarita? How do you make your dirty martini? What's the secret to a good, I don't know, like Ramos Gin Fizz? And so I would be messaging back and forth with these people, and I was like, you know what? I should just put this into like video format. This would be so much easier to get this information out. So I just started putting videos together, and it was cool because people started liking them and started following. And of course you get like a boost here and there when maybe something hits and resonates with somebody and your views go up, and so more people kind of come in. But yeah, and then I realized, I was like, oh man, this really is another form of hospitality. This is like having somebody, instead of sitting at your bar in front of you, you have them sitting in front of their phone enjoying your content, and like you're having a conversation with somebody and being like, hey, this is how you do it. Try it at home. It's not as difficult as you think.
Right.
And yeah, so it kind of just snowballed from there and just kept going, and more people kept on following and watching. And yeah, it was just a really cool thing to see. And I had seen a lot of people, like obviously like yourself, and doing lots of stuff on YouTube, and there was a few people doing kind of the shorter format content on like TikTok and Instagram, and I don't know, I'm like close to 40, and I was like, I have no business being on TikTok. I was like, back then especially, I'm like, these are like youngsters dancing and singing. I was like, what am I doing on here? But I'm glad that I joined when I did, because like I said, it wasn't as saturated back then, and now, there's more and more people that are on the platform, but it was a great way to kind of get out there and be like, all right, I miss doing this behind my actual bar. Why not do it behind my home bar?
The way I view it too is that, in our industry is not exactly scalable, right? Like usually, like if you're a bartender, you're at one location, or like you either start a brand or you sell a product or whatever. So social media is kind of a way to scale the unscalable. At least that's the way I started thinking about it when I started making content. Because it was like, well, obviously at the time, just like you, my bar and restaurant, we couldn't have anyone sit at the bar. We had built this brand new bar. It was beautiful, but no one had sat at it. So it was like, well, how do I scale what is unscalable, right? Like, how do I get people to be able to like enjoy my bar atmosphere without being able to be here? So
exactly.
It's a very interesting thing to have gone through.
And it was a completely different audience too. So like, pre-pandemic, like you said, after winning world class, I was traveling around the world and putting on seminars, talking to bartenders, doing guest shifts at different bars around the world, and it was fantastic, judging cocktail competitions. So I had that, like, I was able to do that peer mentoring like in person, and it was great. Obviously nobody was flying around the world and nobody was traveling during for almost 2 years there, and so for me I was like, how do I find this outlet to reach a different audience? Like, so it's the people, I would say the majority of people who follow me on socials, probably 90% of them have no idea of like my past history, my credentials, or my experience in world class. Like, they're following me because maybe they've just scrolled past and found me on the internet, and they're like, oh, this girl seems to know what she's talking about, which is great.
Right.
Which is really cool too, because it's like I'm reaching different people, as we all are. It's like I'm reaching the consumer that comes into the restaurant, not just like before when I would go to bar specific things. Like, bar convents and, seminars and all that kind of stuff where I'm specifically talking to bartenders. Now this opened up an even broader audience of like, oh, these are just cocktail enthusiasts. These are people that are the ones that will go to the bar and spend the money and, buy that cocktail book, buy those, bar tools and this and that, who are actually absorbing the information, not just taking it at face value, like,
Right.
when you go to different seminars and stuff. So it's also really cool just to have that completely different audience than my like niche cocktail world that I belong to as well. Like
right.
two
It's
very
also a bit of a
different
challenge
worlds.
to have that audience, though, too, because then there are these people that get up on the internet and they don't know what your background is, and they think that they know better than you, and then they try to mansplain cocktails to you, and you're like,
Listen.
and then like your first instinct, or my first instinct anyway, is to be like, hey, wait a minute, buddy. You don't know what you're talking about. I do know what I'm talking about. I've been doing this for many years, and I make it my business to know everything about it. But you can't do that because then you seem defensive.
Nah. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
On the internet,
And
that is
luckily,
My
Go
favorite
for
thing
it,
that I
Louis.
think I've ever seen was, it was on, I forget what video of yours it was on TikTok years ago, and someone was mansplaining to you in the comments, and I don't think it was you who responded, like someone else responded under there. They're like, are you seriously trying to correct the world's best bartender from 2017? And I wish I had saved that interaction, because it was so funny to me, because I'm like, is this dude really trying to do that? And I think it just illustrates your point of what you said.
it's I think we've all had our fair share of like troll comments, people that come through and are like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's a little bit of a different level too when you're female, because you get the gender specific. You don't know what you're talking about. Why would I listen to a girl? Like, oh, like, so that doubling down on top of it too. And of course, if I was to come back and say, I mentioned in like a few of my videos, maybe a handful of my videos, about like world class and just like different accomplishments. And of course, even that, you'll get people in there being like, oh, look at you having to talk about, and you're like, oh God, again, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I'm just, trying to relay that I've been in this industry for a really long time, and I've quite literally dedicated over half of my life to, studying and absorbing as much information as possible, so I can then put it out to you guys now in a way that's, absorbable and that you can understand it. So it's not, it doesn't sound like a bunch of geeky, mixologists curling their mustaches and, like the stereotype that we get sometimes where you're like, oh, you must be a mixologist. I'm like, no, I'm a bartender first and foremost.
But Kaitlyn, to your point is, how do you think that like social media has maybe transformed the way the public interacts with, alcohol and alcohol content? Because one of the things that I think you guys were talking about it when I joined earlier before we started recording, was, what people are looking for in content. And I think that over the last, since the pandemic and, being in the industry firsthand, what do you think has been the difference from like, pre social media blowing up certain content creators and like now? Like, what do you see, like, any thoughts on that, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting to kind of see over the last, probably I would say 3 years, how this like space that we've all been in is kind of like shifting in a very positive way. I would say, like, beforehand, even like going back to like 2017, you go back like far enough, people would, if they're traveling, they would ask like, oh, where's the best place to go and eat? Where should I go, and like what museums? Now you see more and more people being like, oh, where's the best place to go get a cocktail? Where should I go out for like a special occasion to get a drink if I'm traveling and I'm in, Paris or London or whatever the case may be, which is really cool. So with so many people now being in this space talking about cocktails, I think it just gives a better appreciation for like how much work actually goes into creating like drinks. I mean, we were talking earlier about, putting content out there that everybody's got their own kind of way that they put content out, which is kind of nice too. Everybody's like, you've got people who are like, got like very high quality cinematic posts. You got people who are like a little more grassroots. You've got the ones that like to talk to camera. You got the ones that just show their hands. So it's like a little bit of something for everybody. But what's really cool is that people take that in, and now when they go to a bar, they go to a restaurant, they order a drink, or they look at the menu, they can kind of understand what things are. So maybe they're like, oh, I remember, Louis talking about Suze. I know what that is. When before, maybe if they're reading a menu, they're like, I have no idea what this is. What is the flavor profile? So I think there's a lot of information that people are taking in that's super useful and super helpful. I would say when I started my Likeable Cocktails account, like I shifted because I had my personal account where I was posting, everything, but I was posting it mostly just to like other bartenders in the industry. I'm like, I don't need to teach like, I don't know, like Monica Berg or like Ago Peroni how to make a daiquiri. But there's a big audience of people out there that I might think that's a simple drink, but to a lot of people, making simple syrup at home is out of their comfort zone, right? We take that for granted or take advantage of that fact because we've been doing it for so long, but to somebody else that might just be something kind of like new and exciting. So filling that kind of landscape and putting that type of content out there for people to digest and then pass on to somebody else, or like I said, sit at a bar and see, ooh, a milk punch. I know that process. I know what that does. I understand that now. So I think we're helping. And it's interesting now to see like video is king, right? Before it was all photographs on Instagram. Now it's like video is king. If you're not making reels, like, what are you making? And to now see like bars and restaurants and like well-known, like established, like, big time bartenders putting effort into content, and you're like, 2 years ago you weren't doing this and you thought it was kind of silly, but now you're realizing the power of this social media thing, and I'm so glad that everybody's now like hopped onto it because it brings a little bit of validity of what we're doing.
There was like a flashpoint during the pandemic, though, because there was a conversation. I think we actually mentioned this, Louis, in another conversation with a bartender, but there was a point in the pandemic where there was like a little bit of sour grapes happening because there were a bunch of social media people who were making cocktail content that weren't actual bartenders. They were like self-taught home people. And a lot of bartenders, at least on my side, began to see all these big brand deals that they were doing, and they were pissed. They were like really pissed. But my whole thing was like, I understand your frustration, I really do, but at the same time, there's no one stopping you from making your own content, and this is where everything is headed. So you can be mad about it, or you can just grab a camera, make some content, put it out there, try and do the best that you can with it, and then grab some of that brand deal money,
Absolutely. And like when I first started making, like content online too and really putting it out there, I definitely, even from my peers, they would like kind of chuckle at it and be like, oh, you put out another video? And now they're like, oh, fuck, like you're putting out another video? Like, oh, what are you making off that? Or what are you doing here? Or like, oh, you got to go to Mexico, you got to go here, you got to go there. And it's like, yeah, because like getting to work with brands and stuff, like, yeah, obviously bartenders work with brands, restaurants work with brands, like for a reason, because they're trying to make space on their cocktail menus, maybe get a kickback, all that kind of stuff. But like for the three of us who are making content for the general public, it's like that's kind of their target audience is the general public, the people that are going to the liquor store to buy the bottle, people who are like, why wouldn't you?
It's a lot bigger of an audience. And when we got started, when Marius and I got started on the Educated Barfly, there weren't very many. There was only, and we actually didn't even know this at the time, but there was only one other person that had any like real bar knowledge that was doing anything on YouTube. There were like a few one-off. There were like no bartenders that had their own channel. There were people like, I don't know, like Jim Meehan or something that were doing stuff for liquor.com or for Vice or something, but nobody actually had their own channel. And when we got started, we actually were like, this is the void that we want to fill, is we want to be like a professional bartender coming in with professional, advice and technique. I think it's great now that there's so much more, because honestly, there was so much misinformation to correct in the past. And now there still is now, but there's a lot more good information too. And it's a lot easier to find that good information now than it was in the past. So I think absolutely. It's great.
I mean, I used to be one of those bartenders who would see, the influencers of the world get invited to, say like BarConf in Berlin or at Tails or whatever, and you're like, what the hell are these guys doing here? But now I'm like, nah, this is great, because like, why wouldn't they join into the conversation and get even like for some of the content creators out there who've never worked a day in their life behind a bar, but they've dedicated, you know, a lot of time to like learning about the craft and, you know, diving into the history and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, yeah, bring them into the fold so they can also see things from our perspective too, from like the bartender's point of view, and then form these relationships and work together and, you know, create connections that will only be beneficial for like both sides. I don't know, I think people are so afraid of other people like taking their gig or taking stuff away from them, and it's like there's enough out there for everybody. Truly. You know, and it's what you do with it and it's what you make of it is completely up to you.
Not to mention that, like, I actually think that social media has had a positive influence on hospitality and on restaurants, because I'm not sure what it's like other places, but here in LA, there are some very big celebrity chefs that have huge programs, and their cocktail menu for many years was an afterthought. They would put a sommelier in charge. The sommelier would just make, I don't know, Flirtini-style drinks because they really just cared about the wine program. And so you'd have these big celebrity chefs with hugely influential restaurants that have great wine programs, amazing wine programs, and then just really bad cocktail programs. And after cocktails blew up on the internet, those celebrity chefs decided to hire actual cocktail, like, knowledgeable bartenders and consultants to not only like actually have drink program managers, so that they actually have a cocktail program and an ice program. They know what these things are, and it elevates the experience tenfold for everybody.
100%. I mean, that's basic. That's my main bread and butter. Like, that's what I do for a living.
Right,
you know?
Guys, we did that. So.
Yeah, I consulting on like 2 programs right now, and it's cool because it's like, yeah, you know, if you know what you're doing and you put the right, you know, piece of the puzzle in place, you can make and execute an amazing bar program for somebody else to step in and, like, you know, do it on a regular basis, on a daily basis. But again, too, it's like, I don't know. It's fun for me because I get to go around and I do a lot of guest shifts, and I do, you know, like pop-ups here and there, and it's really cool because you get people that come out who like follow you on social media, and they're like, oh, this is awesome, like I watch you on my phone, but now I get to sit at the bar and actually taste a drink that you're making versus just like looking at it through my phone. And I love that, and it's fun, and I wish there was more of that, you know, because like I said, a lot of people want to see it be done, and for me, I want to get behind a bar with some of my you know, fellow content creators who maybe have never worked a shift behind a bar, and just to kind of be like, you know, rib them a little bit to be like, see, this is the fun part, but this is also the tough part of this industry, like making 3 drinks at a time, like. Come on, let's do it. Let's get in there and have some fun.
Leandro had this idea, and I know Miguel had it as well last year when I was with him at Tails. But we were talking with, I think it was we did an interview with Jordan, and Leandro was like, we should at Tails find a bar that'll allow us to like take it over for like, I don't know, 5 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, whatever amount of time, and then each of us kind of just take a shift and then just like all hang out, because you know, I think it'd be really cool. Like you said, it'd be awesome to get to like really. Because one of the most, at least for me, right, I have my own bar and restaurant. So when someone comes in and gets the ability to taste a drink that I did feature on my socials, like that feeling is awesome, right? Because like, again, I think it ties back to that whole scaling the unscalable, because they're like, oh, dude, I watched you on, you know, I've had people drive like 3 hours just to come to my bar. Yeah. And it was like the craziest like experience. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, we're in the middle of the suburbs of Massachusetts. Why are you here, right? But it's like, it's like amazing. And so, you know, I think that this kind of just goes back to, I love the fact that all of us doing content is actually expanding the audience for this type of thing. Where, like you were saying, people are now actually interested in cocktails and what goes into it. And so, you know, I would love to be able to have an event like at Tails or at a big conference where it's like, hey, we're just going to get all these awesome content creators. We're just going to bartend. Like, that would be really cool.
Let loose. Have some fun.
Yeah. So here's the idea, guys. Here's the idea. Here's the actual idea, right? This is what we do, all right? We get a brand, right, to sponsor, or several brands to sponsor. Maybe we can get like 5 or 6 brands to sponsor. We start in LA. You guys fly out to LA. We get a tour bus, okay? We get a tour bus, all right, to live in. All right, and we bartend at different bars all across the country. Each different bar is a different creator or bartender, and then the rest of us will like help out, bar back, MC. We just all make content throughout the whole way, and every single one, and then at the then the last stop is tails, and we just have a big party, and everyone just takes an hour and a half bartending shift, and parties and bartends, so that we just basically go on tour like a band. That's the idea.
That sounds like a beautiful disaster. I love your ambition. As long as there's like a few other like female or like people on the bus, I'm all for it.
Who we got? We got Bad Birdie. We got you.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
There's so many women. Yeah. Join Jules. There's so many women in this space. Of course, it'll be like a nice mix. All the friends.
So Kaitlyn, you've now done so many diverse. You've fulfilled so many diverse roles within this industry, right? Like we touched upon it at the beginning. How has your perspective on the hospitality and bar culture kind of changed over the years? Because you've probably seen it from every possible angle that you can imagine at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a shift in terms of like what people expect. For a while there, when like photographic content was like very big on like Instagram, people would come into an establishment and just show you a picture of something, be like, can you make me this? And he would just show you a picture of something and be like, maybe, I don't know, like what's in it, like what does it entail, I might not have all the ingredients for it. So it's kind of shifted a little bit away from people just shoving a phone in your face and being like, hey, can you make this? But I think post-pandemic, post-lockdowns, post all that, people are now, very intentional when they go out, spending money. It's expensive out there. It's not cheap to go out for, an evening of even 2 or 3 drinks. So I think people are expecting a little bit more, I would say, hospitality involved, of like, you're not just sitting down and getting a drink put and then you're ignored for the rest of the night. So I think a lot of places are starting to warm up to that version of hospitality that's a little bit more connective and a little bit more like personable, which I love to see, because that's what keeps people coming back, for a second time or a third time, or telling their friends, being like, I had an amazing experience at XYZ. And I'm pretty lucky that I get to travel around quite a bit and experience hospitality at different places. And like I was just in Barcelona a couple weeks ago for Paradiso, which is like, they were number 1 on the 50 best bar list a couple of years ago. They were putting on a sustainability summit, and it was awesome. But like, just to watch those guys and like the way that they were moving about and the hospitality that we're showing, like literally every person that was walking through the door, it wasn't just like, oh, like the special people who are in town that they know and they get like, the best treatment. It's like, no, everybody who walked through that door got the same welcome cocktail, got the same exact treatment, which I love to see. And it's like, I feel that way in like Mexico City. Anytime I go out there, it's like the hospitality is always the leveled up one. So I think if it keeps leveling up like that, where people are like putting those extra touches in, everybody kind of starts to realize like, oh, that's what's going to get butts in seats. That's what's going to keep pushing us forward to make us money and get people coming out. So I definitely have seen like an increase of, like I said, that personal one-on-one version of hospitality than say pre-COVID and all that, which is great. I love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, Leandro's always been pretty adamant about this, where he, always says, at least every time we've ever done any video together, it's like, what we do is like, sure, like as a bartender, like knowing recipes is cool, making cocktails is cool, but like your actual job is very, it's not as dependent on the cocktail as it is the hospitality. The hospitality is 100% the biggest part of what we do. Which I think is super important, and like I agree with you. I think that has been a great shift to witness.
Nobody cares what you do if you're an asshole. Like nobody cares. Nobody cares how talented you are. Nobody cares how much knowledge you have. Nobody cares. You could be, I don't know. You could be the Quentin Tarantino of cocktails. Nobody gives a shit if you're an asshole. And so I always tell my barbacks,
tastes subpar.
Yeah, I always tell my barbacks, 10% skill and talent, 90% hospitality. That's what we do. We're in the people business. This isn't the drinks business. Like, this isn't the you're a bartender show business. Right? Yeah. This is the
tend to the bar.
Yeah, this is the people. We're in a people business.
Yeah, I had an amazing experience back in January. I was at the Connaught, and I've got Giorgio and Ego who have like this little roll-up martini cart that comes to your table and make you a tableside martini, and just the experience of being in that kind of like historical room and having this like, this martini cart be rolled up to you. But it was really cool because so there's a siren going on behind me. My partner doesn't drink, and so what they did was they made her a completely non-alcoholic martini, but did the exact same service for me as for them. So, the whole like long pour with like the zesting the stream and beautiful like glassware and the accoutrements and everything. And it was like, see, now for me, I'm like, that's hospitality. That you took this experience that is very cocktail centric, making a martini. It's definitely a little bit more difficult to make a non-alcoholic martini than it is, a full strength one, because it's all booze. But you're giving as much time and effort and care into this non-alcoholic variation as you did with my very alcoholic version. And to me, I was like, see, a little effort goes a long way, and I will continue to tell those stories of people going above and beyond when they don't have to, and that's what, again, keeps people coming back for more. And
I used to be really suspicious of that Connaught technique until I tried it. And then I was like, oh, wow, you actually do. Because I always thought, like, as you're pouring from up here, and then you're zesting it with citrus. And all of that zest is going everywhere. I mean, it's going into the stream, but it's going everywhere. Yeah. But then I tried it, and I was like, oh, this actually works. It might even be a little better than just zesting it on the drink.
It's not just about the zest though, right? Because when you're pouring from a higher angle, you're aerating it even more into the glass, creating a bit more of that like the texture. But also too, like, again, like, we're visual people. Somebody's gonna whip out their phone and take a video of that every single time because it's a cool experience. God bless him, and I love him so much, but like my brother from another mother, David Rios, he does his like tong magic when he's like zesting lemon over a drink. He's got these two little tongs that he goes.
I've seen him do this. Yes, I've seen him do this.
I love David so much, and that's his shtick. He's been doing it for years, and I'm like, David, does it really do anything? He's like, you see these people? They're mesmerized. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. I was like, absolutely right. Like, who cares if it's adding that much more lemony goodness to your drink? You've got like all eyes on you right now, like enthralled with what you're doing, and that's exactly what you wanted to happen,
it's a good
right?
Point.
Absolutely.
So, it's I mean, like, listen, Louis, it's like pouring soda down a bar spoon, right? It's how fucking dumb is that?
Oh, the pouring of
does
soda
it really
down
help?
the bar spoon.
Does it really, does it not? Does it? Maybe not. Who cares? It captures people's attention. And I swear to you, like, I made that video thinking like, this is just kind of like one of these dumb throwaway ones, right? And it got some good traction. And then Louis comes in and he like stitches it, and it's like 20-something million views later. And I still to this day get people coming up to me being like, bar spoon, and I was like, for fuck's sakes. I was like, Jesus Christ.
I'm so happy you brought it up. Yes, for anybody who doesn't know, I stitched one of Kaitlyn's videos a couple of years ago, and it's, to this day, the single piece of thing I've ever put out in the world that the most people have seen, and it's the silliest, dumbest, most non-consequential thing on the planet, but it captures people's imagination. It's so great.
Right? People are like, I didn't know you could do this. And then you get the funny stitches where people have like a soda gun and they're trying to do it with a soda gun, and you're like, no, it's not going to work. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, you just never know what is going to like get people's attention, and what's basic to maybe the three of us, because we've been doing this for so long, to somebody who's just, walking in off the street who has no knowledge about cocktails or anything, sees something and they're like, I'm going to try that for my friends at home next time I make, gin and tonics. And then when they do it and they come back and they tell you and they're like, my friends were so impressed. And I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what we wanted to happen. Like, that's something cool. I love it.
Part of it is show. Part of it is showmanship is really important.
The razzle dazzle,
Yeah.
It's like when I fling a cucumber twirl around my tongs.
Gotta put a show.
Oh, but that's skill.
Yeah, the twirly, and the twirly
it's
cucumber.
Again, it's the razzle dazzle. I'm like, all right, people are like, whoa, what the heck? And you're like, there you go. Like, any chance I get, I'm flinging a cucumber somewhere. I love it.
Well, Kaitlyn, to circle back to something that you were talking about when you were speaking about when you were out with your partner and they made her a non-alcoholic martini. What is your relationship with alcohol and drinking? And like, do you feel a responsibility as a content creator with a large platform to really like kind of touch upon that aspect, because that's something that I've really tried to be. I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I've always said it to people, and I think I made a story a while back where I'm like, guys, this shit's poison. Like, I'm not like I don't
100%.
want. I don't want people to think that I'm like making it out to be like better than it is. Like, but I just want to hear from your perspective, because obviously you said you were a sober bartender for a while. Your partner does not drink. So like, what is your relationship with alcohol and drinking?
Yeah, I mean, I don't drink all that much at home. If I do, it's very rarely a cocktail. It's maybe like a cider or a glass of wine. But even then, like bottles of wine go to waste here because I'll have like 1 or 2 glasses and the rest of the bottle just like oxidizes. But yeah, I mean, I've done it very intentionally to not promote like overconsumption on my page. I am about drinking better, not more. And I've turned down many brand deal opportunities with like hangover remedy pills or, like, I don't know, like liver balance something or like a hydrolyte pack and you can use it in a cocktail. I'm like, for me, I need to be authentic to the content that I make, and that's no shade to anybody that pushes that stuff. Like, again, you do you. Like, that, if that's a part of your brand, then all the power to you. But for me personally, I like intentionally kind of say no to those things because, again, I don't want to promote you having a hangover. Like, I'm not promoting like, yeah, drink 3 of these cocktails, and it's just not the content I make. And same with, we were talking about, like throwing a bunch of bottles of boobs into a bathtub and you're, like, again, like I'm not necessarily making content for, college kids. If it happens, it happens. But some rowdy dogs back there.
That's my dogs.
I love it.
That's my dogs got let
yeah,
out, and they have a competition with the dog next door.
Love
so
it.
They're yelling through the fence.
But yeah, I mean, I try to, when I can, give examples of like, non-alcoholic substitutes or, what have you. I'll definitely add that in. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for, being behind a bar for 20 years. You kind of, you have to have a good relationship with alcohol or it's not sustainable for your well-being
100%.
And everything in between, especially like with traveling and stuff too. It's like I'm not getting any younger and my body is already like breaking down in other ways that I can't do it like I used to. So, but yeah, for content wise, it's never about the overconsumption. It's about drinking better and using better quality things versus just getting it down the hatch. And yeah, I get requests all the time for different shots and this and that. I'm like, again, that's just not my content. Like, I don't need to teach you how to make a green tea shot or something else. Like, it's just not who I am. So, and again, like having the followers that we all have, they come to, they follow you for a reason. And so if you're not staying kind of true to, who you are, then they probably, they might turn to somebody else instead because they're like, oh, that's weird. This person used to, preach about this and, maybe, Louis, if you started using Casamigos and cocktails, it'd be like, whoa, what the hell, man? Like, this guy used to preach against this stuff. Now it's using
no,
it.
he can't. He cannot do that. You cannot actually. There's about 70% of all tequila brands that you are now barred from using.
Oh, I know. I painted a target on my forehead to that I make it very difficult
The
on myself.
they're gonna raid your house next. Actually.
I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a little. So I put out a video last night about the situation, and I was sitting there going like, "Do I put this out?" Like I was sitting there, I'm like, I'm trying to be factual. And what I did last night, I was like, I'm gonna be as factual as possible. I'm gonna try to be as nice as possible. But even so, I'm still sitting there going, I don't know if I should put this out.
But listen, that's true. That's true to who you are, right?
It's like a complete conspiracy. What's going on?
Yeah.
I was actually going to do like a longer form version of that on YouTube because people should know.
They should.
And you gotta stay true to who you are. It's like I try not to. I will recommend spirits on my page, but I don't ever. For me personally, I don't ever say anything negative about particular brands. But that's because like working on the other side of things, like, working and owning and operating a bar or a restaurant, or if I'm working with a certain brand or company that they already have ties to, certain products, like I, have to be a little bit wise and cautious of like, okay, well, this restaurant I'm working with has a brand deal with, X, Y, and Z. I gotta work with what I gotta work with. Yeah. Also, like what's available in my market versus what's available in your market versus what's available to somebody who lives in, buttfuck nowhere. So yeah, it's intentional too that I don't often do like spirit kind of like, don't drink this, drink that. But I will recommend stuff that I personally like to drink. But yeah,
I don't typically
it can be tricky.
Bash either,
it can get tricky. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And I don't typically do that either, but I will just promote what I think is good. And I also have a list of companies that I will not work with. There are people that I will never work with. Like there are like certain brands that I don't like. And my whole thing is this, like people on the internet, like the viewers on the internet, the people who are watching our content are very brand sensitive as it is. So any brand stuff that you do is going to get 50% less views than when you just do whatever you authentically want to do. So I make sure that whatever brand that I work with, I am able to get behind 100% because I can't sell stuff that I'm not behind. But at the same time, I also don't want to, I also want to make sure that if I'm going to take that dip in views, at least it's authentic and it's not just a play for money,
Exactly. Yeah, and like there is, like you said, there is that fine line that you kind of skate sometimes where you're like, ooh, gotta pay the bills, but also ethics.
Right.
No, right. I mean, like I've gotten reached out to by, we've gotten reached out to by like some brands that have offered a lot, and it's, and you got to think like, okay, like I got to look into this brand, like pretty recently we got reached out to by a company. They offered a lot. And then I still had to be like, I need you guys to send me out samples. I need to like research the brand and, taste it and see if this is something that I'd like to get behind. And I do that every single time. And if it doesn't meet the criteria, I don't care how much money, because I can't put a price on credibility, right? You can't.
Absolutely.
If you lose your credibility,
and that's why people follow you.
Right.
No, and like that's why people follow you for what you put out there, right? And it's like they, once you form this relationship with like your viewership, people like trust you, and that does weigh heavy because you're like, oh shit, like there's a lot of people being, I'm sure we all get DMs being like, oh, I bought that product or that product that you were using, da 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 da, and it's like, oh, fantastic, like I don't get any kickbacks from that, but it obviously, if I'm putting it out there, I'm endorsing it and I'm saying, yeah, use this, it's quality. But again, too, like the stuff that I have access to is very slim in comparison to a lot of other places. Right. So, unfortunately, it's like, well, this is the only thing that was available in my price range. Because again, like, I mean, being in Canada, like, it's very hard to monetize. I don't get money off of views. I don't get money off of like any of that stuff. It's only if I ever do a brand deal that I can make money. So I'm genuinely putting out this content because I genuinely want it out there. So I'm not just, putting stuff out because I'm like, ooh, this I know is going to get like a ton of hits because it's controversial or whatever the case may be. Because I'm like, I don't make money off views. I'm Canadian. Like, I wish I did, but I don't.
I mean, you can't make money off of views. There's no TikTok Creators Fund.
Any short, there's nothing.
Like any shorts or like any short. Even the TikTok Creators Fund's a joke. You don't really make any money off of that. It's like a raffle, basically. The most you can make is like $200 or $300. You can't monetize views on Instagram, and you can't monetize, like, even though the views, the shorts on YouTube are quote unquote monetized, you make like not even pennies on the dollar. It's like fractions of pennies on the dollar. It's really, really bad.
That's so wild.
I had a video hit like 3 million views. It was a short, and I got like $3.20 or something like that, and I was like, wow,
I think we had one that went to like 1 million or something, and it was like $10 or something. And then you have like a regular video go to $1 million, go to $1 million on YouTube, just like a long form video, and you'll make like 10 grand off of that, or like 8 or 9 grand off of that. Whereas like if a short, it'll be like $10, $3, $5, depending on the CRT. It's Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, because I think people don't understand too, like when we're putting out this content, unless like you do have, I mean, I'm very lucky to be friends with a lot of people who work in the spirits world. So they're like, hey, anytime you need a couple extra bottles, like let me know. But I mean, anytime I put out content, I'm like putting money out there to like, buy the citrus, buy the this, buy the, the spirits that I'm using. It's all comes out of pocket at the end of the day. So Yeah. But hey, such is life.
Yeah.
That's why we do what we love.
Absolutely. And
right.
and so, Kaitlyn, one thing I wanted to touch upon and kind of circle back, we were talking a little bit about underrepresented voices in the industry, right? Like you were saying, not only are you a woman, but you're Canadian, and that's, Canadians, right?
Yep.
No, but
Are
to
Canadians
really
underrepresented in the industry?
I would say so. We've never had a bar on the 50 best list. So there you go.
there you go.
Really?
Until-
I find that
until
really
Nor-
surprising. I find that
Until
really
the North
surprising.
American list came through. Now we've got the North American 50 best list. We had like a smattering, but no, a Canadian bar has never been on the 50 best cocktail list.
Wow.
And I think that is
Yeah.
a shame.
But that is also just like many competitions, that those lists are just like whatever gets covered in Punch, it is a club. It is a club.
Oh,
100%. And that's why it took a very long time for anybody from Los Angeles to show up on Punch, because it was basically New York centric, and it was just people who knew people, and it's kind of the same thing with a lot of competitions and those types of lists. It's that you can't really take them that seriously because it's a club. It's and people are
100%.
voting for their friends,
Oh, I mean, I used to vote for those things. So I get it. I mean, it's pretty wild, but I mean, as you're saying about underrepresented voices, I just think back to last month, March was International Women's Month. And I just think I'm it's great that we get a month to, uplift some voices in the industry. But at the same time, I was looking on social media, and I'm like, man, the lack of our male counterparts who did not decide to use one single day out of this month to showcase or elevate or talk about a female in the industry is wild to me. It's maybe you just took a picture of the female staff at your bar, and posted it up, which is great. At least it's something. But the lack of, even just highlighting somebody is as easy as it is to do a video on Ada Coleman and the hanky panky, shows me and tells me that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in, raising voices other than, the typical ones that we hear all the time. So
Right.
I will keep fighting the good fight, especially
Yeah.
for women Canadians, and being a part of the LGBTQ plus community too. It's crazy out there. So it's as loud as we try to be, we could be louder.
Absolutely, and I think that's a huge point too that we should really reaffirm, because I recently launched a newsletter, not too much of a viewership, but I was we did a whole article which I actually featured you in about females in the industry, and we were writing it, and I'm like, I'm a dude. The guy who's helping me write it is a dude, and I'm like, do I feel I felt weird where I was like, is this I don't want it to be a token article where I'm like, oh, let's just throw in some women. So and I was like, we reworked it a couple of times where I was like, let's really talk, let's make this as legit as possible, where I want to make sure that people understand that I'm not just doing this as a token act of kindness, but it's because it's
a quota. Yep.
Yeah, and it was never about that, because at the time we only had 500 subscribers or whatever. But my whole question to you actually was, what are some of the underrepresented voices in the cocktail world that you think maybe deserve a little bit more attention? Because I think that as we should really be looking for more underrepresented voices, because every angle and everybody's perspective is a little bit different. And I would love to hear from you if you have anybody that you think people who are listening or watching should really pay attention to.
People, specific people?
Up to you how you want to answer
it. There's a lot of people that I think do amazing things in our industry. But it kind of, it just goes back to, like you said, to start you have to start the conversation somewhere. So even if you think you're is this going to be viewed as tokenism, or I'm just filling some quota because I haven't, talked about XYZ, it's got to start somewhere, right? So if you're willing to start that conversation, then fantastic. It's just how you keep the momentum going on that. And I think that a lot of that has to do with mentorship. And this is more talking very cocktail centric, not just, broad terms of this cocktail world we're in. But there's a ton of amazing mentors out there. But again, you go to, you go to a seminar, you go to a convention, you go to whatever, and if you look at the list of like speakers, if there isn't a diverse group of speakers, then you kind of have to be like, why is that? Like, why isn't there more like BIPOC voices being uplifted? Why isn't there more like, you know, queer people being highlighted? Especially, you know, there's, you know, within Canada and around the world, like there's a lot of discourse on like the trans community at the moment, and you know there are plenty of amazing, you know, bartenders and people that work in this industry who, you know, fall under that umbrella that never get a platform to speak on unless it's political or unless it's, again, filling that quota. It's like introducing people into the conversation just because you find them interesting is fantastic. You should do that more often.
But why do you think that is? Do you think that there's a lack of people in the trans community, just as an example, putting content out there, or do you think that their voices are being actively repressed?
I mean, I don't know if it's actively being repressed, but they're not actively being uplifted either. You know, they're just in the conversation. And again, like I don't want to have my voice uplifted just because it's like, oh, this is an easy one. This ticks a couple boxes. Like, yep, check. Canadian, check. Woman, check. You know, queer, check. Whatever. And it's like, perfect. Let's get this person, you know, in the roster. But I want to be there because I deserve to be there. But
right.
Again,
and I would say that you do. But my question would be like, how do you differentiate between someone uplifting you for, I don't know, an authentic reason and then tokenism? Like how would you differentiate between that? Like, I mean, you said like a lot of men that you saw that a lot of men didn't do anything for like International Women's Month, but then how would you differentiate between someone doing that because they really felt compelled to do that, or someone doing it because they felt like they needed to tick a box because it is... Tick a box,
yeah.
Right.
I mean, like I said, you got to start somewhere, right? And starting somewhere and then continuing that conversation. So, you know, putting it on like your, you know, if you're writing a content calendar, if you're writing out a calendar for events, right? You can kind of look to the future of like, okay, who do we have involved? What are we doing? What are we talking about? And if, you know, every single content is like, cool, featuring a recipe from a man, maybe a woman, maybe a person of color, but again, another man, and it's like thinking ahead, being like, okay, well, how do we continue this conversation outside of the month of March, outside of International Women's Month, or whatever the case may be. Like, I think it's like Black Women's History Month for the month of April. You know, it's like, how can we, you know, continue that conversation outside of the month and, you know, fit it into our slots of content, fit it into our slots of
I've always felt like these months are great, but at the same time, it is kind of a form of tokenism, and really,
it can be,
you know,
absolutely.
It really should just be that these voices are always heard to the same level as every other voice, you know. And that, like, you know, you shouldn't just do Ada Coleman because it's International Black Women's History Month. You should do Ada Coleman because she's a part of this. She's a part of the history of this industry, made a fantastic cocktail, and that's the reason why, you know.
Yeah, she was like the first female, longest running female to run the Savoy Bar. You know, it's like, yeah, there's
right.
There's
She's an incredible bartender in person, and I think that you're right. Yeah, I think that it can devolve to tokenism, and it's kind of hard to differentiate when that's happening, when it's not at times, though.
Yeah, I think it's just the way that you, again, it's the way that you approach it. If you go into it with a, you know, a positive mindset of being like, this isn't tokenism, this is, you know, genuine love, care, and respect for whoever you're, you know, highlighting, then you gotta continue that conversation and continue showing that versus, you know, making it a once a month thing or a once a whatever thing. I just like, there's so many amazing people in our industry, and something that always stuck with me is like the year after I won World Class, it was 2018, and we were in Berlin at the finals for like the following year, and the year before me, Jennifer Lachenette won from France. And so that's 2 female winners in a row. We're like, this is amazing. I remember standing in a room, and there was the top 4, and one of them happened to be a female. And I was standing by these 2 industry icons, people that I absolutely look up to, who are, you know, been in this industry for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. And we're chatting about, oh, who do we think's gonna win? And one of these people who I like respected so much turns to like his buddy and goes, well, as long as it's not another girl, we don't need 3 in a row. And said it so seriously that I was like, man, I was like, you just went from being like up here for me to down here. And I was like, okay. I was like, because you would never say that about 3 men winning in a row. You wouldn't be like, oh, as long as it's not another man, like, that's fine.
That would never
so
be said.
for me, in my mindset, ever since then, I was like, well, it's like, this is where we got to keep, like, there's so much work still to be done that if these, like, now I call them dinosaurs, these dinosaurs of our industry who have that mindset, who are mentoring the next generation, I was like, that's not great. So yeah, I mean, it keeps me going. It keeps me plugging away, trying to be that, example and role model for people. But
and one of the things that I think people really should know, and I don't know if this is as front of mind for everybody as it should be, about 60% of all bartenders, at least in America, are women. They're not men. So like the actual, like, I forget where the data comes from, but I've seen it in a couple of different places. It's about 50 something to 60% of all bartenders in America are women. So it's like you have a larger percentage of actual people working in this industry as women, yet the representation is very small in comparison, which is really messed up.
I'm also going to come in with another Leandro hot take.
Okay, all right.
A little controversial, but
I
I
like a
would
hot
also
take.
say, just based on my observations, women are better bartenders than men.
I'm not going to argue that one. I've worked with some
Listen,
incredible women. Every single
To me,
time,
that's
they've
not a hot
always
take.
been better.
to me, that's not a hot take. Listen, we were born and bred to multitask like no other. Work through pain, work through, challenges.
That might have been the warmest take I've heard.
Yeah. That was an excellent take.
It's a
That was
good
the
take,
perfect
Leandro. But all right, Kaitlyn,
But not to make it serious about that, it doesn't need to get so heavy, but it's something that I will forever be passionate about, of just trying to upraise some, I don't know, all these new generations of bartenders that come through day in and day out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important thing to be vocal about.
Put some positivity. Yeah.
I really do think it's an important thing to be vocal about, especially as you watch our country backslide right now politically. Not to get into a political session, but we're backsliding politically. And then also, there are a whole bunch of these people that sit around and say, well, you shouldn't be focusing on somebody's race, or you shouldn't be focusing on somebody's gender, because it should just be about the best person. But then that whole idea just completely ignores hundreds of years of repression, and it also ignores the fact that we are not on a level playing field, and that the scales are tipped. And if you ignore that, then nothing will ever get better. It will never be more equitable. We will never raise up voices to be like, we will never have to stop raising voices because every voice is raised, because you just can't ignore the reality of where our society is at.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of those things that's forever going to be ongoing, and if you let it lay to rest, then nothing will come of it. So
yeah. Well, so Kaitlyn, to kind of wrap up this incredible conversation, I've been loving every second about it. To be perfectly honest with you,
we went heavy, guys.
Yeah, well, which I think is important. I loved it. Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta.
So the last question, you can either take it as a two-parter or answer it as one, is, where do you see the world of bartending and cocktail culture headed in the next 5 to 10 years? And then maybe as a last little bit, like, what's a piece of advice you'd give to a young professional in this field? Whatever way you want to take that, the world is your oyster.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the way that cocktail culture is going is, I don't know, I think people are, like I said, are expecting more, which is great. I hate the word trend, so I try not to call the non-alcoholic movement a trend, because it's always been there. It's just we're getting better at producing stuff other than a soda water with a splash of cranberry or a Shirley Temple. But I think it's going to be interesting to see in the next couple of years of more cannabis products coming out, and different stuff outside of alcohol make its way into kind of the mainstream. So I am excited to kind of see where that goes. But yeah, I think people are getting more and more creative, and opening up spaces and challenging what it is to have a cocktail presented in front of you. It's more of an experiential thing, which I think is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, advice for people getting into this stuff. I mean, I get people ask me all the time. It's like, how do I get into bartending? What do I do? What's the best way? I mean, for me, it was all about learning. You know, it's like I got in there at a, you know, the grassroots level of, you know, being a bar back and, you know, going through the ranks. But like sit at people's bars and observe. You know, if there's a particular bar that you like to go to in town with a bartender that you're like, wow, this person's really cool, I really like their style, sit at their bar, watch them, observe, take in all the information you can, see what they're doing and what makes them the type of person that you want to keep coming back to. But you have to start somewhere. So sometimes it's like, you know, at the bottom and you work your way up. And if you show that you have ambition and if you show that you have like the willingness to want to learn and be a team player, then, you know, the better and better you're going to get. Go to events, go to seminars, go to tastings. You know, like I said, after 20 years of doing this, I still haven't stopped learning. I still go to tastings. I still pick up books and read and try to take in as much information as possible. But yeah, be a sponge.
Good advice.
Sponge.
That was
Get a
great.
mentor.
I feel like I didn't do enough justice. I feel like I could have listened to you talk about both of those topics for a while, and that was my bad. Anyway, Leandre,
I always talk, so you got to cut me off at some point. I am a talker, so.
Leandre, you got any other questions for our incredible guest here?
Ooh, I don't know. I think I learned so much. I'm so glad to have been able to talk to you. I've been following your content ever since you started posting it, or maybe just a little bit after. I've always really loved what you do. I really like the creative stuff that you bring to social media, and I'm just very stoked to talk to you. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, I'm very, very happy that you guys invited me on, because again, it's fun to have these conversations, you know, with people that you only know really from like socials and from like that perspective. So it's nice to get a little bit deeper with people and, you know, yeah, get inside your brains a bit, which is great for me. And yeah, I love it. And both of you guys, you know, keep killing it with what you're putting out there, because people love it and people are taking it in, and that's half the battle, what we're trying to achieve out there, I think.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think so. And I'm glad that we went a little deeper on this one. I'm glad that we did. It's good. Sometimes it's good to have the hard conversations, or to say things that are a little, you know, I don't know, controversial or just topical or just like the way things should be, you know?
Well, that's the thing. You can, like you said earlier, if you don't talk about them, they go ignored and they just kind of go like, you know, like they're swept under the rug. So every once in a while, it's good to kind of like bring up hard topics to maybe not address right away, but to get your wheels turning and to get you thinking, and just to kind of be like, oh yeah, maybe I should do something, or maybe I should talk about this a little bit more, or get other people thinking about how they approach bartenders and spaces and events and all that kind of stuff. So.
Well, Kaitlyn, I want to open it up to you, and if there's anything else you want to share with the audience. And honestly, I kind of left this for the end because I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk about it or not, but I saw that you posted on your stories that you are working on your cocktail book.
Yes.
You know, something that you and I talked about in Mexico. And if you don't want to talk about it, great. We can cut this part right at the end and it's going in the trash. But if you want to, you know, give a little bit of plug for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right in the thick of it. I have to like deliver my finished manuscript in July, so it's creeping up real quick.
Ooh, that's creeping up.
But I'm really excited. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time, and just, you know, again, you never have enough time. You're never ready. You never feel. You get imposter syndrome is you know, way up there, but it's been really cool to build out this platform that is Likeable Cocktails, because it's, like I said, it's a very different world outside of my like craft cocktail tiny little world. So yeah, writing this book it's been really fun, and it's been a struggle. But I get to publish it with, you know, like a dream publisher of mine. I'm doing it with 10 Speed Press and Penguin Random House up in Canada. And it's gonna likely come out in 2025. The process always takes a long time, but it was really important for me to write a book that encompassed like all facets of bartending. So we've got the concept or premises is, you know, every page starts with a classic cocktail, you know, the way that it was originally written, and from that is born like my variation of it, and also from that is born a completely non-alcoholic version of it. So you can flip to a Negroni and be like, do I want the classic Negroni today? Do I want the interpolation of it, or do I want a completely non-alcoholic version of the Negroni? So it's a book for everybody. Like again, you know, there's a ton of books out there that are like low and no, or just classics, or just remixes. So putting everything all together in one and making it feel inclusive and equal to everybody was really important to me. So yeah, just writing those recipes, man. But 2025, keep your eye out.
Well, awesome.
Well, we'll do for sure.